more Swiss chard. This is Swiss chard in the ground. That's peppermint stick Swiss chard is what it's called, just because it's pink. And those plants are kind of nearing the end of their life cycle, and I have baby plants growing now to replace them. So I should have zucchini and squash through the fall.
Now, these baby plants, are they being seeded by the mother, or are you transplanting from some other field?
I bought seeds.
Okay, you have
So I
seeds.
have the seeds that grew these plants. I reserve them and use them for the fall also. And those are under all these little white tents because the baby plants are so tender and basically vulnerable that they have to be covered
Protected,
and protected from the sun and the heavy rains. So I have cucumbers. This is my second round of cucumbers under these, and then second round of squash and zucchini under the.
How much of the plant diversity here is can reseed itself? What I mean is, how much of this do you have to replant every year, and how much of it as a percentage can you harvest seeds and regrow?
So anything squash related, you can't always regrow the seeds because if they're heirloom or hybrid, a seed doesn't necessarily give you back what you planted. You have to get those from the store. But there are several plants in the garden, tomatillos and tomatoes, that I call volunteers. They came up from last year's seeds that were just left in the ground. So tomatoes would definitely replant themselves. The sunflowers for sure, the tomatillos for sure. This gentleman next to me, he has a whole plot full of volunteer tomatillo plants, and every year he picks a few to nurture and get the tomatillos from, and then the rest he lets them die off, and then they come back next year. And that back corner where they're kind of the lighter colors, that's all volunteers from last year's field. And then all this up here is very purposeful, where he's moved them and is giving them more water and taking care of them.
Now, and this is embarrassing to admit, but are tomatillos native to this high up north in North America? I thought they were more southern.
They survive, but
all the way
not,
up here.
they're not
Okay.
native, but
Okay.
they survive. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and our winters aren't as cold as they used to be.
Yeah.
So maybe a few years ago, 10, 15 years ago, they may not have survived over winter. But their seeds are surviving. The plants aren't. They die back. And then the seeds, anything that hits the soil, comes back the following year.
That is a remarkable characteristic that I'm going to try and understand a little bit further. How it is a seed loses the capacity to replace itself, even though it exists, because of, like you mentioned, the hybridization and how different parts of the gene are activated just once. And because I think in software, I'm thinking that it's like a fire once and forget. The plant is able to fire itself alive, and then beyond that, nothing.
Sometimes, like onions have 2 years in their life cycle. They go to seed the second year and then they're done.
She says these things like I'm supposed to know them, right?
Don't
But
you
I'm
know?
pretty sure that nobody knows these things. This is also why I'm doing it, right? That for some reason there are minds like hers that just collect these things like magnets. And yeah, let's get more of them.
Yeah,
Let's
and
make
then
more of them.
Tomatoes and tomatillos regrow from seed, but they're not thriving. They're meant to be originally underbrush
Oh,
plants.
okay,
So
okay.
and they're tropical. So they have the whole year over year over year to grow and turn into tomatoes and ripen tomatoes and never die back. And they're living in part shade under trees. But we've
Hence
decided
the
we wanna-
nightshades, right?
Exactly. They are nightshades. Peppers as well, eggplants also. So we've put them in direct sun and baby them and nurse them and hope that they thrive, because we're forcing them to ripen before it gets too cold, because the plants themselves won't last in the cold. Where they come from, they don't have to worry about that. It's tropical. It's Mediterranean or tropical.
Yeah, and part of what I'm also hoping to capture for myself if I ever get the opportunity to put seeds into the ground, is this kind of understanding, right? How because a mind has to anticipate that, oh, this plant is not going to survive the frost, and so then you come in here and you do something different. So there must be quintessentially something very different about how farming is conducted in the northern hemisphere and in places like the tropics.
Yeah.
Because there's an entire force that is coming to squash everything you've done.
This isn't where your produce comes from. They come from giant greenhouses and temperature controlled places where they're pollinated by hand, they're genetically modified, they thrive and survive the winters. So people are doing it on much larger scales to help the plants survive the winter.
So essentially we have two ways of continuing to live the way we've always lived. Either we're going to have to create more room for people to do what you're doing right now, which some people may argue is not sustainable for the population of the world, or we must admit that we're going to be eating hydroponics food. Is that
pretty much? Yeah. I mean,
okay.
Our beehives, our pollinating honeybees are on the verge of becoming endangered. We have a field of wildflowers growing just to help bring some pollinators here to help us with our plants. If my cucumber plants don't get pollinated, I don't get any cucumbers. If my zucchini doesn't get pollinated, I don't get any zucchini. They do have genetically modified plants that are not as bountiful, but they're self-pollinating. They don't need to be pollinated. But those are not natural. It's not how the plant originated. It was genetically modified to do that. Yeah.
I think that it's important for us to have a conversation around what you just said. I think that sometimes the people who are closest to the knowledge, they're not, they don't bring as much desperation when they communicate. You said something that was so profoundly mind twisting for me, but you just said it and you kept talking, which is the fact that, oh, you know what? Our food is just going to come from being grown under fluorescent light, or because it's just not sustainable. I hope that somebody's watching this that is in college, that is in high school, and you want a big problem to solve, right? It is important for your food to grow up in the sunlight. We're not smart enough to understand all the things that sun does to our food before we eat it. And so, yeah, for those of us who can, we'll continue to eat food that's grown in the sunlight. But this should be how all human beings live. And so let's get the technologists and the farmers and the engineers and the all the people we can enlist to make sure that more of this happens, because I can assure you that the produce from this farm is going to feed and taste different and turn on different genes in the human body than the one that is grown under fluorescent light. That's not just me speaking. You can read the science, right? And yeah, the vitamin D that these plants are soaking right now. And so I just wonder, right? What happens if we create a world where the place where my neighbor here is, where we are, is vacant, right? What if we don't have us, right? What if we don't have a community of people who find it as valuable, who see that there's something wrong with our food all our produce coming from Peru and Mexico? What do we do to that world? I want you to say something to the audience that conveys the sense of urgency, because I think that sometimes people like you think that we're always going to be here and we're going to die and we're going to be resurrected and we'll come back and then we'll inspire some other young lady to be on the farm and some other young man to be here. How do we get this message across to the people who wield power? Because this is one of one in Woodbridge, right?
Yeah.
As far as you know. So this here, my friends, is one of one in Woodbridge. Woodbridge is a big town, okay? And this is a one of one. That is how rare she is. That is how rare all of this is. And I don't know, maybe this is also represented in Fredericksburg, and maybe in Loudoun County, and maybe in Fairfax. But if we have that, what do we have? Because we're counting on Debbie. We're counting on the neighbor who grows the tomatillos. We're counting on, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 families to conserve the biosphere and all the supportive and native things that come together to make the world work. Is it sustainable? I don't know. Maybe somebody thinks it's cool. I don't think so. I don't think Debbie thinks so. So the people who make this thing, whoever, governor, and I want you. Can I just vote you up to one of those boards so that
No.
you can go change Woodbridge?
No.
Because yeah, she won't do it. That is part of the
Won't
problem we have in
time
the
to
world,
play-
right?
play in my- play in the
Exactly, exactly. But anyway, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. We didn't even talk about the dynamics you told me about the what is it, the marigold that puts out the pungent thing that, yeah. So I'll say this real quick
Deer
because
don't like marigolds.
so you know what she does? You see this extraordinarily beautiful array of colors? Well, you think it's just looks, right? Except it turns out that this is also why the deer will not come and eat all of this, because they will, right? And she knows this. I didn't know it. And somebody needs to know that in the world, because if everybody forgets, then someday when we need to protect ourselves from the deer without killing them, we may not remember that planting marigolds around our plants will protect them.
It's called companion planting.
You heard that, right?
Companion planting, you can do basil, cilantro, marigold. This is nasturtium that is at the end of its life cycle, but you can't smell it, but it's very stinky.
Yeah.
And it's edible. But it's plant animals don't like it. There's a groundhog that lives here that has left and they love Swiss chard, left the Swiss chard alone, left my cabbage alone, I think because of this marigold. And their
See that?
deer that come through the woods can jump these fences without even any effort whatsoever, and they haven't come in either to eat the Swiss chard. They have eaten some of the neighbors' plants, but not my Swiss chard. So that's good.
Right? And so,
Yes.
I don't know. I'm sure somebody's going to tell us that, yeah, there's 8 billion of us in the world, and you and Debbie can play your fun little thing in the backwoods of Woodbridge and think that you're doing something cool, but this is not going to touch. And I understand that, right? But isn't it wonderful that somebody like her knows these things, right? And because she knows these things, I now know them, and I don't know, right? We're going to keep sharing this knowledge, and when I go back south to North Carolina, I'll bring some of this knowledge, and I'll ask my representative or whoever they are that where are the community farms, where are these systems that can sustain, where citizens who are enterprising like Debbie can come out with their skill and their resources with her red truck over there and her water tank, and it jiggers and shakes every time she drives across from my yard. And yeah, let's make more of this, because it's better for the world, and it's the world that all of us want to live in and inhabit.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So I'll come out here and I'll capture more of this. As long as I'm up here on Sundays when I leave Mass, I'll come out here and capture more of this, because I'm hoping that it'll speak to someone, and that it'll also lead to greater engagement in systems like these, because sometimes you just don't know that they exist. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. You're welcome. Anytime.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Don't we love Debbie? We all do.